What if I told you that the players? What if I told you it costs more than an arm and a leg? That one injury can impact the rest of your life. What if I told you an injury leaves more than a scar?
Welcome to Hanover College Student Spotlight. I'm your host, Jordan Taylor. Football is a dangerous game that involves a lot of risks, and the injuries associated can be devastating. A single injury can end a player's career. It is this way at all levels, and Hanover College is no different. The Panthers are the pride and joy of this community, but are the players we love to watch safe? Today we have two special guests joining us to discuss the dangers of football. First, we have Jake Namasnack, a junior here at Hanover. Jake tore his Lisfrac joint in his foot during Week 9 in the last regular season game. We also have sophomore Zach Yetter joining us. Yetter tore his ACL and meniscus during a routine drill 2 weeks in a training camp of his freshman year. After this devastating injury, he decided to retire from the sport he loved. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
So, there's a reputation that football paints it's an injury-prone sport. Zach, what makes football more dangerous than any sport?
You know, I think what makes football such an injury-based sport is that it's just such a public, it's in the public sphere a lot. You know, it's a very popular sport. You have the Super Bowl that was obviously last week. A lot of people tuned in to watch that. So a lot of people are watching, and if an injury happens, you know, people are going to see it. And just the nature of the game, it's a very violent sport in general. You know, you have grown men going at each other in pads. It's just very violence-oriented. So I think with that, with any sport really, there's going to be a lot of injuries. So I think that's kind of the reputation that football has nowadays.
You know, college football players are statistically 3 times more likely to get injured than any other athletes in any sport. I talked to a few coaches here at Hanover about injuries and how many athletes choose to stop playing after they get hurt. Most of them typically said that 1 to 2 athletes a year leave the team after injury. Zach, I know you weren't the only one to suffer a serious injury your freshman year, right?
Yeah, so there were a lot of guys that I think had very similar experiences to me during the season. I was only 2 weeks into training camp when I tore my ACL meniscus in a routine practice drill. I know I would say probably 6 or 7 guys that year alone that retired due to their injuries just because it was so severe, it was so jarring, and especially coming in as a freshman, the last thing you want to do is get injured, have surgery, and then be on crutches for 4 or 5 weeks. So I really think there's a lot more injuries than what we think, and a lot more people that retire from their injuries, and just the coaches might blame it on them losing the passion for the game, something like that, but I really think that injuries are the prime reason people decide not to play.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. You know, sometimes happens where injuries can be misdiagnosed at first. Jake, your first injury often gets confused with a mid-foot sprain. Were you aware of how severe your injury was at first?
I wasn't. You know, the thing is when I first got injured, I mean, you saw it on the film, I fall down right away. And I didn't really think much of it. I thought, I really can't just lay here. So I got up, ran off to the sideline, and I said, I broke my toe. That's like I thought it was at first, but it wasn't. And then I go get x-rays with the doctors, and they tell me it could have been a mid-foot sprain. But then they tell me I'm fine the next day. So I go this entire week thinking, I could probably play. I could probably play next weekend. And it's not until that Wednesday before the game where they tell me I have to go get an MRI. And then the next day, I get told I have to get surgery. And I'm going to have 3 screws put in my foot. So you don't really think about it at first until later on in the week when they actually tell you what the injury is.
Jake, your ankle injury obviously ended your career and required surgery. It's probably going to be a little different coming back next year with your injury and everything. What kind of new challenges you are expecting to face in this next upcoming season?
The mentality of it. You get injured once, and honestly, I'll be honest, I'm afraid to make a cut off my left foot. I'm afraid to run out on the field and get tackled by a 300-pound defensive lineman or cut left and injured my foot again, because you don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen on a football field. It's obvious. You see it every day in NFL, NCAA, college football, it happens. So just going out there and just trying to overcome that mental aspect of being hurt would probably be the biggest challenge I face.
Yeah. Getting surgery on any body part can be damaging in the long run. Zach, if your injury was less severe and it didn't require surgery, do you think maybe you could have returned to the game that you love?
Yeah, I believe that surgery was a big backbreaker to me, just because it put me on crutches, like I said, for 4 or 5 weeks, really made physical therapy horrible. And, I haven't had a whole lot of surgeries in my life, so this was kind of a newer aspect for me. And so going in, having my knee cut open, being in surgery for 2-3 hours just was a big mental aspect that I really wasn't, I don't think I was going to be able to overcome that. And that's why I think surgery isn't necessarily just the physical aspect. I think it's really the mental aspect that it puts on your body. It really puts a strain on what you think you're going to be able to do, and that's honestly one of the biggest reasons I decided to retire, because I personally did not think I couldn't come back. It wasn't that I didn't want to put the work in, because I put the work in. I'm pretty close to 100% now. It's just that mental block that I had, mental barrier that I had, that I really just did not think I could push through and come back. So.
Yeah, I can actually relate to both of you and having to deal with football-related injuries, because the injuries that make you choose between the game that you love and having to quit. I broke my thumb during the first week of training camp and was out a few weeks, and then got a high ankle sprain about a week after that, 2 weeks after that, in the middle of the season. What made you decide to stay on this team right after getting hurt, Jake?
I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to give up on my teammates. They're my brothers. I go out there and I compete with them. I fight with them on the field. And I thought if I just walked away from the sport that I loved, I'd be letting myself down, and I'd be letting the team down in general. And I don't want to do that to them. I want to come back. I want to play. I want to be better than I was last year.
And Zach, your injury, it was so bad that you end up having to quit.
Yep.
Okay. What kind of things were you going through in your head that made you make this decision?
Yeah, see, I think my experience was a little different than Jake's, just because it was literally 2 weeks into the season. So I really hadn't formed that bond with my teammates yet. So I didn't really see them. I mean, I had a bunch of friends on the team. I was starting to develop those relationships, but I didn't see them necessarily as brothers yet. And so I think that was the thing. It wasn't necessarily me letting them down. It was what's best for me at that point. I want to be able to walk when I'm 50 years old. That was my biggest thing. And during those months of physical therapy, it was going through my mind. I really just did not want to, let my teammates down, and definitely my family down too, because they were my biggest fans. We're a big sports-oriented family. I came to college to play football, following my dad's footsteps. He played here too. So really, that was one of the biggest things that I had to wrestle with, is feeling like I was going to let my family down. But eventually, they understood that this was what was best for me, and I understood that this is what was best for me. So I really just decided that I want to be able to have a future where I'm not limping around all the time. So, yeah.
All right, one last thing before we wrap up here. Is there any advice either of you would have to give to somebody going through an experience like this or an injury?
Don't give up. Don't let one injury determine your future. I mean, yes, it could be severe enough. I mean, obviously, be safe to yourself. Like, if you absolutely mess up your foot or your ankle, don't play. But if you can come back, and the doctors say that you can come back, then then take on that challenge. Take on and come back and be better than you were the year before.
And kind of going off of that too is don't lose hope. I think that's one of the biggest things. I kind of got lost in physical therapy, and it being my freshman year, I kind of lost that hope, that drive to play. And I really think that if it would have been any other year, this year, junior year, senior year, I would have definitely jumped back in and playing. But it being my senior year, I lost that hope. I lost that drive. And, to anybody that's dealing with injuries, just don't lose that hope. Don't lose that drive, because that's important, and it's a tough decision to make. So,
well, I want to thank both of you for talking with me about your injuries today. I know it isn't the easiest thing to talk about, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today and listening to all the great things that our two guests had to say. Remember to support Hanover College athletes and the great athletes that risk their bodies for our community. Thank you.